Welcome to the English Language Institute of Singapore's podcast series on classroom inquiry. I'm Ines. In this episode, we'll be listening to Mr. David Ng, a senior teacher from Edgefield Primary School, in conversation with Dr. Alison Tan from Elis. David participated in our Classroom Inquiry for English Language and Literature Teachers course in 2022 and is also an active member of the Elis Classroom Inquiry Special Interest Group. In 2023, he led a team of teachers to conduct an inquiry to address mixed case letter identification difficulty among the lower primary students. They presented their study at the SIG's year-end Celebrating Learning session in 2023. Encouraged by the results of their study and the usefulness of the classroom inquiry process, David and the teachers in his professional learning team are continuing to engage in classroom inquiry for professional learning and to improve practice.
Hello, David. Welcome to the elispodcast.
Hi, Alison. It's good to see you again.
David, could you tell us what motivated you to sign up for Classroom Inquiry?
I had attended the Singapore Writers Institute at Elis in 2015. We affectionately refer to this as SWI, S-W-I. Well, one of the strands covered by SWI was the role of the teacher as an inquirer. I recognized then that as a teacher, I had neglected that role. I felt strongly that teachers need to be inquiring into their own classroom practices and not just rely on the past experiences to inform their practice. This is why I felt that I need to learn more about classroom inquiry as part of my own professional development. As a teacher leader, I needed to be a role model for my peers.
As a role model, could you elaborate on that?
I need to role model how I take ownership of my own professional development, especially how to become a more effective classroom teacher. I want to make sure that I'm effective in helping my students learn. I also want to be effective in helping my teachers learn.
So for these reasons, you signed up for the CIELL course?
Actually, there is another motivator. I had attended the Elis Classroom Inquiry webinar in 2022, and I saw a few primary school teachers present their classroom inquiries. What struck me was how doable, how accessible CI can be, and how it need not be a full-blown research with large samples and statistics involved. I remembered the simplicity of the 4-stage inquiry process and thought that, hey, I could do this. I could do it too.
It's good to know that the webinar had such an effect on you. That was certainly its objective, to demystify CI, to show teachers that CI is accessible and doable. So you signed up for the CIELL course after that?
Yes.
What were your takeaways from that course, David?
I got to know each stage of the CI process better, learn how to plan, to conduct and communicate my inquiry, and how to do that in a guided and systematic way. On top of that, the Elis specialist gave the assurance that support will be provided. After that, I felt ready to undertake my own project.
Is this why after the CI course you joined the SIG?
Yes, the CI course is one of the few courses that provides continued support, and this is after the course ends. I find that is important because my learning should not end. I need to apply my learning to deepen it and would still need support in that process.
So you decided to embark on Classroom Inquiry after that. How did you decide on your inquiry focus in question?
Well, remember I had wanted to do a study on my book club.
Yes.
It's my passion. Yeah. Despite my passion about the book club with my colleagues, I learned quickly that it didn't warrant an inquiry question. Then you all asked, what teaching and learning problem did I encounter in my classrooms? Problems that I really wanted to understand and fix. That's when the mixed case letters issue came to mind.
Could you elaborate on that for our listeners?
Sure. I was teaching Primary 4 in 2022 and saw that quite a number of my students were using capital letters randomly in their sentences. I was certain that they had been taught penmanship in lower primary, and so was puzzled by this phenomenon. As a teacher, I was frustrated that I still had to deal with penmanship at Primary 4. My English language colleagues across the level also experienced the same problem and were equally frustrated by it. We strongly felt that we needed to conduct an intervention. But back then, we thought it must just be a bad habit we needed to address. And so studying it as a classroom inquiry project didn't come immediately to mind.
So what changed your mind?
Remember, you highlighted an article that talked about the importance of handwriting for literacy and cognitive development. That article motivated us to address the problem because we would be attending to something that would affect their development as learners and their progress through the levels. The article reminded us that for handwriting instruction to be effective, it needed to be explicitly and consistently taught over time.
So you decided it was a problem worth investigating.
Yes, certainly. From my interactions with the ALICE specialists at the SIG meetings, I learned that I could not just base my decisions on a hunch. I needed to find out why my students were mixing up the upper and lower case in their handwriting and design an intervention based on a proper diagnosis of the problem.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
My colleagues and I compared the students' handwriting in their penmanship writing book with their writing in the stellar learning sheets. We saw that the students used the correct case when they could copy the model text from the left side directly onto the lined pages on the right. However, when writing without model texts, they would mix up the cases. The capital letters would pop up randomly in their written answers.
What did you deduce from that?
We concluded that the students still had not learned to apply the correct case independently and would need more guidance and scaffolding.
So what did you do?
The first thing I did was to approach 2 more teachers who would be willing to undertake this CI with me. They are Miss Tan Pin, Joyce, and Mrs. Manju Manoj. We were all going to be teaching the same level, Primary 1, the following year. I did a quick introduction of CI to them, and they came on board readily. We each identified 5 students from our own English classes after looking through their worksheets and penmanship book. These students were exhibiting the case mix-up as described earlier. They formed our target group of students for intervention.
Tell us about the intervention. What intervention did you design to address the problem that you observed?
The first thing we noticed was how the students did not get the case mixed up when they were presented with the standard tri-lined writing space found in typical penmanship exercise books. However, when presented with a blank space with no lines, their written answers would invariably contain a stray capital letter here and there. We decided to reprint the worksheets for the next 2 stellar units, converting all blank writing spaces into tri-line spaces. This will be the first visual cue to help students write in the correct case. Secondly, Pimpin found a resource on the internet, a poster depicting various penmanship conventions. It illustrated things like letter spacing, letter formation in terms of tall and short letters, letters with tails below the written line, etc. Letter case formation was also clearly illustrated. We adapted this resource as a visual cue card, printed it in color, and laminated it. I pasted the cue cards on the classroom desks of my 5 students, while Pimpin and Manju instructed their respective students to have them handy whenever they did independent written work.
I see. What were the objectives of your intervention? What did you hope the intervention will achieve?
Well, we were basically providing scaffolds for the students to work independently. The tri-line spaces and the cue cards were meant to serve as reminders of what they had already learned in their penmanship exercises previously. These scaffolds were meant to help them apply what they had learned.
I see. Tell us more about your classroom inquiry plan. For example, how long did you take to plan the inquiry? When did you conduct the intervention? Over how many lessons or weeks did the intervention take place?
The team spent the first semester planning the CI. We had compared and analyzed the students' work over 5 stellar units as part of the planning stage. As mentioned, we reprinted the worksheets for the next 2 units to contain the tri-line spaces. These will be Unit 6 and Unit 7. That would cover about 4 to 5 weeks of curriculum time. Subsequent stellar worksheets were untouched, meaning the students had blank spaces to fill in as in earlier Units 1 to 5. At the end of Unit 7, the students were told that the 3-line spaces would no longer be there, but they were expected to continue writing accurately without case mix-ups. However, the cue cards were made available to all 15 students throughout Semester 2.
Ah, I see. Now, data collection. What types of data did you collect and how did you go about collecting them?
So all in all, we had student artifacts from pre-intervention, that's 5 units, intervention, we had 2 units, and post-intervention, 3 units, for us to draw data and do our analysis. Other than that, we also conducted interviews with the students. Each of us sat our 5 students down to discuss how they felt about the extra support provided, whether they referred to the cue cards, and whether the tri-lined writing space served its purpose to remind them to write accurately.
So how did you analyze your data?
We counted the number of instances of case mix-up in all their worksheets and did a comparison to gauge the effectiveness of our intervention. As for the discussion with the students, the 3 of us compared notes for similarities and differences in students' responses.
So, David, what was the inquiry experience like for you? Like, for example, what went according to plan? What didn't?
Well, involving Pinpin and Manju in this CI was a positive step. It allowed me to work with peers in tackling real challenge that we were facing. I'm confident they would also concur that it was a worthwhile task that we undertook because it was meaningful work that we were doing. As for what went according to plan, I think we were spot on for our timeline as we stuck closely to the CI plan. What didn't go according to plan was when we didn't get full participation from the identified students. 3 out of the 15 identified had attendance issues and other learning challenges. So we couldn't glean much from their sparsely completed worksheets.
Oh, that was unfortunate. Was your experience of classroom inquiry what you expected?
Very much so. I knew I had access to Alice specialists for consultation. I had the full support from my head of department, who happened to be my reporting officer as well. So I went into CI with confidence that I was getting the support I needed. Plus, I think it was very reassuring to hear that our project was not a trivial matter. I mean, during CI touchpoints, I was hearing colleagues from other schools tackling Socratic questioning techniques or using ICT tools to tackle ideation in writing. They were tackling inquiries that seemed very complex or at a higher cognitive level. And here we were tackling mundane letter formation issues, small letters, capital letters. I was very, very heartened when Alice specialists and fellow SIG members commended our efforts.
You did good, David. Did you encounter any challenges along the way?
Yes, my challenge was finding my way around the CI process. Even though the CI is broken into 4 stages, I realized it's not a linear process. There are overlaps in the stages, and I found myself going back and forth at some points. For example, data analysis comes after the intervention stage. But I found myself needing to do some data analysis even at the planning stage because we had to look at the pre-intervention data to properly diagnose the problem.
So how do you overcome the challenges?
Seek guidance and assurance. The conversations during CI touchpoint sessions and one-to-one consultation with Alice specialists allowed me to clarify my doubts. These prodded me to keep going in the right direction.
That's good to know. What did you learn as a result of doing this inquiry?
My greatest takeaway from this CI is nothing is too small or trivial. The trivial challenge we help our students overcome has huge impact down the road for them. This was gleaned from reading the article, The Importance of Teaching Handwriting for Cognitive Development by Diana Rigg. Another thing I learned was that I needed to provide better explanations for the cue cards. When I pasted the cards on the student's desk, I had assumed that they would refer to them intuitively. In actual fact, some students later confessed that they did not know what to do with the cards.
Oh dear. Now, what impact has the inquiry had on your practice?
I learned that it is important to develop myself as a teacher-inquirer. Failing to do so will be shortchanging my students, as I would probably dismiss students' errors as careless mistakes and brush them aside. Thereafter, I expect to probably be marking the same errors over and over again.
We don't want that, do we? Now, would you encourage teachers to undertake their own classroom inquiries?
Yes, I think we would be exercising our professionalism when we actively inquire into classroom teaching and learning. We want teaching to be a respected profession, then we ought to be engaged in professional learning. CI is one such avenue for us to develop ourselves. Moreover, we would also be role modeling what the English language syllabus aims for our students, to be creative inquirers.
What is one piece of advice you would give to them?
I would encourage teachers to join a community involved in CI. Participate as a member first to gain experience. When you are ready to take on a project, be proactive and tackle a challenge that you face in your classroom.
Thank you, David, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You've just listened to an episode of the Classroom Inquiry podcast series from the English Language Institute of Singapore. To find out more about the Alice podcast, visit go.gov.sg /ELIS podcast. Thank you for listening.